Good morning. We are reading The Wheel on the School by Maynard de Jong, pictures by Maurice Sendak. We are still in chapter 7, Auka and the Tin Man. And Auka has just left the Tin Man and his unhappy family, and he is walking away. It was such a relief to run away from the unhappiness that Auka ran harder and harder. The storks stopped him. There were two storks, again, on the same house that he had passed with the wagon. Both of them were coming down with the reeds in their bills, big as life, flapping low now, settling on the wheel on the roof. Huge, white, wonderful, big as life. Auka stood staring up at them open-mouthed. Eyes on the storks, head thrown back, all absorbed. Auka edged into the little yard alongside the house. Now the storks were right above him on the roof. He felt almost as if he could reach up and touch them. A poorly placed twig fell from the great sprawly nest on the wagon wheel, rattled down the roof, and landed at Auka's feet. Auka picked it up and drew his arm back to toss it up to the storks. A woman rapped sharply on the window pane. Auka dropped his hand. The woman shoved the window open. "What are you doing in my yard?" she demanded. "Who gave you permission?" Auka brought his eyes down from the storks and became aware of the stick he was still holding. "Oh," he confusedly explained. "They just dropped this down the roof, and I was going to pass it back." He dropped the stick. "You're a stranger here, aren't you?" the woman said. "Do you always walk right into people's yards?" "Oh, no," Auka said, "but there were the storks. I did walk right in, didn't I?" "Yes, and you must have unlatched the gate to do it." Auka managed a little apologetic laugh. I guess I did, but I didn't know it. You see, there were the storks so close, and in Shora we don't have storks at all, and you have them on your roof." The woman smiled at Auka's excited interest in her storks. "Well, they're on the roof every year, and I guess one gets sort of used to them. Still, if you've never had a stork in your village, I suppose it is exciting." "Every year?" Auka said, wonder in his voice. "And in Shora?" "Say," he said suddenly, "are you maybe Lena's aunt? I go to school with Lena, and she wrote a story about what you told her about the storks, and now we're all trying to find a wheel to put on our school to make the storks come to Shora. That's why I'm way out here in Ness." "Well, now think of that," the woman said, "and Lena started it all. But boy, I'm afraid it'll do no good to look for a wheel in Ness. Every spare wheel in Ness goes up on the roof every spring. Why, it's almost part of spring house cleaning. You just notice mine because mine already has storks. I always get the first storks in Ness. But nearly every house has a wheel on the roof, as you can see. In fact, they're all up except the one across the street. Evert is getting that up today. At least I see he's got the ladder up against the house. But Evert is always late. He's too fussy. He even paints his wheel." She stuck her head out the window to look at the house across the street. Auka followed her gaze. An oldish man was coming around the house, rolling a wheel toward the ladder. "Look at that," Lena's aunt exclaimed scornfully. "He's even gone patriotic this year and painted it red, white, and blue. At least other years he had it just one color, and even then he never got a stork. Storks don't like all that bright color. It scares them away. But you can't tell Evert anything, the stubborn old fool." Across the street, the old man had begun to shove the wheel up the ladder. It was a big, heavy-looking, solid wheel, and Evert was having a struggle. The sheer weight of the wheel seemed to make it hard for him to get his foot on the next higher rung on the ladder. "He'll never make it," Auka said to Lena's aunt. "Maybe I'd better give him a hand." Old Evert had stopped halfway up the ladder to rest. Now he stared up the length of the ladder and the steep pitch of roof still ahead of him. He looked around helplessly. His eyes fell on Auka. "Hey, boy," he yelled. "Want to earn 2.5 cents helping me get this wheel on the roof? I'll give you half a nickel." "Sure," Auka said promptly. Half a nickel was not just to be picked up every day, and he'd been going to do it for nothing. "Bye, Lena's aunt," he said hastily and hurried to the street. He remembered to close the gate. "You can tell the old fool for me," Lena's aunt said softly. "He's wasting his money and his strength. Storks won't settle on a wheel that's lit up like a lighthouse. Auka didn't intend to say anything that might make him lose the surprise offer of 2.5 cents. He sprinted across the street. "What do you want me to do?" he asked Evert from the foot of the ladder. "Get the other ladder that's behind the house and set it up next to mine. Then we can both push the wheel up. You can handle a ladder, can't you?" For 2.5 cents, Auka would have been willing to try to handle 2.5 ladders. He hustled. He struggled the ladder up against the house, slid it tightly against Evert's ladder, then he climbed up and took hold of the wheel. "That helps," Evert breathed gratefully as he felt the strain ease, "just so once we get it on the edge of the roof." Auka looked at the heavy, solid wheel, looked up the long pitch of the tile roof, looked back at the solid wheel again, and then it struck him. "What a work for nothing," he said. "What do you mean for nothing? I'm paying you, ain't I?" "You're doing it for nothing," Auka said pointedly. "Lena's aunt says that you'll never get storks on a wheel that's painted red, white, and blue like a flag on a lighthouse, and she ought to know. The storks are already nesting on her wheel." He nodded toward the roof across the street. Evert looked at the roof across the street. With enormous flappings of its huge wings, a stork with a twig crosswise in its bill was just then settling down on the rim of the wheel. "See that?" Auka said. "Sure I see it," Evert said testily, "but they'll land on mine just as well once we get it up." "The bright paint will keep them away," Auka said knowingly. "What you need," he pursued relentlessly, "is an old beat-up wheel, just so that it'll hold storks. Lena's aunt's is just an old wheel." "Oh, so," Evert said. "Well, all I've got is a good solid painted wheel, and they'll take it or leave it." "They'll leave it," Auka said promptly, "and next fall you'll just have to haul it down again." "What a work!" "I called you over here to help me, not to give me an argument," Evert said sourly, "and if I didn't have to stand here arguing and holding up a heavy wheel at the same time, I'd give you a good sound swat around the ears." "No, but," Auka said, I know where you can get just the wheel you need, good and old, and it doesn't have one speck of paint on it. It's even more beat up than Lena's aunt's." He put his shoulder under the wheel and took most of its weight so he could carefully explain to Evert about the Tin Man and his hopeless wheel. "He can't go out with it again," Auka finished in all earnestness, "no matter how long he soaks it in the canal." The man looked at him oddly. "So you're a funny kid, bothering your head about other people's troubles. The Tin Man has always had troubles and always will with that house full of kids, but those are his troubles, not yours and not mine." "No, but," Auka persisted, "if he had your wheel, he could use his wagon, and if you had his, you'd get storks." Evert looked at him hard. Are you sure Lena's aunt isn't your aunt? You worry so much about other people's business, you must be related." Auka stubbornly tried a new tack. "Tomorrow's Sunday. If you don't get your wheel up today, you won't get it up again until Monday, and you're way late as it is. Lena's aunt's storks are already nesting." "Meaning what?" Evert demanded. "I don't think I'll help you get it up," Auka said determinedly. "Then you don't get your 2.5 cents. "No, but you won't get your storks. You won't anyway on a painted wheel, but—" "Oh, all right," Evert said. "You're the most persistent, queer kid I've ever seen, but it's less work to give in to you than stand up on a ladder, holding a wheel and arguing with you. Help me slide it down." Auka grabbed the wheel. When they had it resting against the foot of the ladder, he kept an eye on the man, expecting to get a hard box on the ear at any moment. Evert grumbled to himself. "Perfectly sound wheel for an old beat-up thing," he muttered. "But then the Tin Man wouldn't have a red cent to paint me to boot." He came to a decision. "All right," he said to Auka, "roll it away. Come back with the other one. I'll give it a try. She across the street isn't going to rub my nose in it every year and every year again. Beat it!" Auka jumped to take the wheel. "I'll be right back, and then I'll help you put up the old wheel. It'll be much lighter. You'll see, you'll get storks, and storks bring all kinds of good luck," he promised in grateful excitement. "Well, they're bringing the Tin Man some," Evert said. "Beat it before I change my mind." Auka rolled the wheel away. As he came down the street, Auka saw that the Tin Man, his wife, and all the little children were still around the wagon. The Tin Man was working on the old wheel. Auka couldn't wait. "Look what I got!" he yelled down the street. He rolled the wheel wildly toward the astonished group around the wagon. "We've got to get your old one off the axle right away, and then I've got to take it up to Evert up the street," he explained. "We better work fast." "Evert?" The Tin Man couldn't believe it. Evert must be getting soft in the head, he told his wife. They stood there awed by the glazed red, white, and blue wheel. I can explain why we changed the wheel, Auka said. We'd better do it quick. Evert might change his mind. Now the Tin Man sprang into action, and with Auka jabbering excitedly beside him, he soon had the wagon jacked up. The old wheel had been off the axle so often it practically fell off the moment the big nut that held it in place had been removed. Auka and the Tin Man slid the new wheel on the axle. The Tin Man had to step back a moment to admire the wheel. Auka twisted the nut into place and gave it a last hard turn with the wagon wrench. The Tin Man wasn't satisfied but had to give it another turn. Then he stepped back again. With the new wheel in place, he at last seemed to be able to believe his good luck. He rushed to the old wheel and heaved it on the wagon. "Everybody up on the wagon," he shouted. "All you kids, every last one. We're going to take this boy back to Shora, in-state, on the wagon. You get on the wagon and catch them as I toss them up to you," he excitedly ordered Auka. Auka caught children as they came up to him and deposited them around his feet among the tin in the bottom of the wagon. Even the Tin Man's wife had to climb up on the high seat with the baby and share in the ride of triumph. "We'll first ride up to Evert's to thank him and help him get the old wheel on the roof. Then on to Shora," the Tin Man said. "Here's hoping Evert gets some storks on the old wheel. He's never had one. But I'll get him some storks if I have to catch them and tie them to Evert's wheel," he promised. Everybody laughed happily at his excitement. The wagon rattled and clattered and jangled to Evert's house. In all the excited talk of the thankful Tin Man, Evert wasn't given much chance to change his mind or even to think. With Evert watching in confusion, Auka and the Tin Man swarmed up the ladders with the wheel. Even the steep roof seemed no problem to the Tin Man. He could have climbed walls and walked on clouds. In no time at all, the wheel was fastened to the brackets on the ridge of the roof. "There now, Evert," the Tin Man shouted down jubilantly. "If the good Lord doesn't send you a couple of storks for such a good deed, as he will, I'll get them for you in person." "Tin ones," Evert said sourly. "No, good, lucky, live ones, just like those." He pointed to the nest on Lena's aunt's house. You'll see, Suddenly he was staring up into the sky. He pointed. "There they come! There they come! Get me down from here! Get the ladders down! Here come Evert's storks!" Because he was so sure, everybody believed him. They hardly gave him time to scramble down the ladder. Even the Tin Man's wife helped to pull the ladders down, and they hastily laid them on the ground. Two of the children who had climbed out of the wagon were tossed back in again. The wife wasn't given time to get into the high seat. "Just run alongside for a minute. I've got to get all this shiny tin away from Evert's house. It mustn't scare the storks," the Tin Man said from his seat. Auka and the wife trotted beside the wagon. 6 houses beyond Evert's, the wagon stopped. The Tin Man's wife got up into the high seat. Auka handed her the baby and climbed up after her. The Tin Man's eyes were fixed on the sky. In the wagon box, the little children stared solemnly into the sky. "Gotta get this wagon still further away," the Tin Man muttered. "All this shiny, jangling tin." They rattled farther down the street. Everybody stared up at the 2 flying storks. The storks were circling high over nests. Back at the house, Evert was crouched behind a bush, straining up, not moving a hair. The circling storks dipped lower, and then still lower. "I'd hate myself," the Tin Man muttered, "if I scared those storks away." He clucked frantically to the horse. The old horse sensed the urgency in his voice. The wagon rattled out of Ness and onto Shora.